51 underground silos. 10,000 people in each one. 300 years of history. And for 3 centuries, the official story is that not a single one of them has ever spoken to another. That's the part one can't get past. Not the isolation itself. Isolation is easy to explain in a story about hiding a secret. What's hard to explain is how you keep 51 separate populations, each one with its own engineers, its own diggers, its own curious kids poking around in the mechanical levels, from ever once punching a hole in the wrong direction for 300 straight years. You don't get that by accident. You get that by design. And in Season 3 of Silo, the show finally started showing its work. So today I want to actually dig into this, pun fully intended, using what the show has confirmed, what the books already told us years ago, and what's just pure fan math. I'll flag which is which as we go, because half the fun of this show is knowing exactly how much you're allowed to believe that. Let's start with the guy who accidentally blew this whole thing open in episode 1 of Season 3. And I don't think the show even meant for it to land this hard. His name is Ed Harwood. He's the head of mines in Silo 18, and early in the season he's called in front of the new council to explain why 7 miners just got buried in a tunnel collapse. His answer is not comforting. He tells the room this wasn't an accident. It's the result of 300 years of digging, layered on top of 300 years of more digging, all through a silo that was never designed to be mined this hard for this long. Then he says the line that should have set off alarms in every fan theory channel simultaneously. The tunnels go every direction. Just never out. Not more than 200 feet from the surface because the pact forbids it. Sit with that for a second. Why would a legal document, a religious document, basically the thing every citizen is raised to treat as gospel, specifically ban digging upward past 200 feet? You don't write a rule against something nobody would ever try. You write a rule against the one thing people keep trying. Juliet, now sitting on the council herself, catches this immediately. She doesn't say much. She just notes it, files it away, which, if you know anything about Juliet Nichols, means it is absolutely not staying filed away for long. That here's where it stops being background lore and starts being an actual mystery the show is building live, in real time, this season. Ed Harwood's daughter, Glenda, used to run a section of supply. She got replaced by a new character named Orla Kent, and the two of them do not get along, which initially plays like ordinary workplace drama. Except Orla starts noticing things going missing. Not food, not tools anyone would sell on a black market. Grow light bulbs, diamond-tipped drill bits, computer components. The kind of shopping list you'd put together if you were trying to power and cut through solid rock somewhere nobody's supposed to be digging. And then there's the detail that's been driving fans a little insane since it aired. Glenda gets reported in 2 different physical locations at almost the same time, with a timestamp that shouldn't be possible if she just walked there. No, this isn't a twin reveal. Nobody's claiming that. But it's exactly the kind of detail a show plants when it wants you to start asking, how did she get there, instead of who did she meet there? Put those pieces next to each other. A miner who knows exactly how far down and how far out the legal digging limit is. His daughter with inside access to supply. A theft pattern that reads less like corruption and more like a supply run for an unauthorized excavation. And a pact that specifically criminalizes exactly the kind of digging that would make all of this make sense. I'm not going to pretend the show has confirmed where this tunnel goes. It hasn't. But it has confirmed on screen in dialogue that someone with the means and the motive to dig toward another silo is currently doing exactly that. That's new. That's not something the earlier seasons gave us this directly. Now, rewind to something the show planted back in Season 2, because it explains why anyone digging toward another silo would be committing what's basically the worst crime imaginable in this universe. A tunnel gets discovered, and the response to finding it isn't arrest, isn't interrogation. It's a direct warning that simply knowing this thing exists could get an entire silo killed. Not the person who found it, the entire population around them. That's a wildly disproportionate threat for a hole in the ground, unless the hole in the ground isn't really the danger. The danger is what a hole in the ground represents once 2 isolated populations realize the other one exists. Across the show's history, only a small handful of people are ever confirmed to have found evidence of this tunnel. A former head of IT, the silo's top judge, an ordinary worker named George Wilkins, and now Lucas Kyle. 2 of them sit near the top of their silo's power structure, which tracks, Proximity to power tends to mean proximity to the parts of the building nobody talks about. George found it as an ordinary resident, years earlier, and told Juliet about it, though that thread went cold once she left Silo 18. And the judge who found it doesn't survive the season she finds it in. The show gives her death a different immediate cause on screen, but the timing is hard to fully write off given the company she's just joined on that very short list. None of that proves murder by secret. I want to be careful there. The show hasn't confirmed a direct link, and I'm not going to pretend it has. But when the one thing 4 people in 300 years have ever found is treated as a silo-ending liability, coincidence starts doing a lot of heavy lifting. That here's where I want to bring in something the show hasn't spelled out yet, but the source material has been sitting on for years. Hugh Howey's novels, Wool, Shift, and Dust, go further than the show has so far. So consider this the book lore section, clearly separated from what's actually aired. In the books, there's a cluster of silos, led by one designated Silo 40, that doesn't just quietly rebel the way we've seen play out on screen. According to that storyline, they coordinate with each other and manage to block the system's usual kill switch outright, rather than one person sabotaging it from the inside the way we saw happen in Silo 17. That distinction matters more than it sounds like it should. One silo disabling its own termination order from within is a containable problem. It costs the system one silo, and the wider network never even finds out. Multiple silos coordinating to defeat that same kill order proves the weapon itself can be beaten. That's not a containable problem anymore. That's an extinction-level PR crisis for whoever's running this whole operation. And beating a kill signal like that isn't something one clever engineer pulls off alone. It requires shared technical knowledge, coordinated planning, and populations who've never met face-to-face trusting each other enough that nobody sells the plan out along the way. Which, if you think about it, is precisely the kind of trust that only becomes possible once silos can actually talk to each other. So if you're the founders, or whoever built this system, the real nightmare was never one angry silo. It's 50 silos realizing they're being told the exact same lie at the exact same time, and being in a position to act on that together instead of losing the same fight over and over in isolation. Season 3 actually hands us a new lens for all of this, and it's a colder one than I expected. There's a reading of the show right now, floated pretty widely by critics covering the new episodes, that treats the silos less like survival bunkers and more like an active, running experiment. Under that framing, once a test subject figures out they're inside a test, they're considered compromised. That's arguably why Juliet isn't simply executed after everything she's learned. She's medicated and memory wiped instead. The founders aren't protecting a person. They're protecting the integrity of the data. If that's even partly right, isolation was never just crowd control. It was a control group requirement. You can't run 51 parallel experiments and let the subjects compare notes, because the second they do, every result is contaminated at once. There's also chatter, and I want to flag this clearly as fan analysis, not confirmed plot, that some of the tunnel structure on level 14 might be engineered specifically to let a silo-designated Silo 51 trigger emergency procedures in the others. If anything like that turns out to be true, it would mean the tunnels were never purely an accident of overmining. Some of them may have been built into the system on purpose, as the mechanism for enforcing the whole apparatus from underneath. Either way, experiment or enforcement mechanism, the through line is the same. Whoever designed this didn't build isolation as a side effect. They built it as the load-bearing wall point, one more loose thread. And it's a small one, but small details are usually where this show hides its best secrets. Earlier in the series, Bernard corrects the official silo count from 50 to 51, without ever explaining where that extra silo came from or why it needed correcting in the first place. Nobody just casually recounts something like that. You correct a number because the wrong version was serving a purpose, and it stopped being useful. An unexplained 51st silo fits a little too neatly into a story that's increasingly about connective infrastructure nobody's supposed to know exists. Maybe it's a hub. Maybe it's where the tunnels were always meant to lead. The show hasn't told us, and I'd be lying if I said I had a confident answer. But it's exactly the kind of gap worth keeping an eye on as the season keeps unfolding. So let's land the plane. Two silos talking to each other isn't dangerous because conversation is inherently risky. It's dangerous because conversation is the one tool capable of doing something no single trapped population can ever manage alone. recognizing that the story they've been told isn't a tragedy, it's a script. The same script, running in 51 identical rooms at the same time for 300 years. One rebellious silo, the system can survive. It's happened before, and it's been handled, sometimes through sabotage from within, sometimes through the most extreme response available. What it apparently can't survive gracefully is silos that stop being alone at the same moment. And right now, in Season 3, we've got a miner with the exact knowledge needed to dig toward that outcome, a daughter with the access to supply it, and a council that just voted to look the other way on exactly the rule that was built to stop them. If Ed Harwood really is digging toward another silo, he's not just breaking a law. He's testing the one failure mode this entire system has never actually solved. We'll know a lot more in the next few weeks. And honestly, given how this show plants a detail 3 episodes before it pays off, I bet we've already seen more of the answer than we realize. If you've got your own read on what's actually down on level 14, or where you think that 51st silo fits into all this, drop it below. I read every one of them, and some of the best theories on this show have come straight out of the comments. Subscribe if you want the next breakdown, the moment Season 3's finale actually answers some of this. See you in the next one.